had to see him. A quick visit.
Nobody wants to see you reunited with your son more than I do. He needs his mother.
You know, the only reason you got my Georgie and not me is because of money. Jesus, Dad, what are you doing here?
Your daddy's running into a streak of luck. Hey, let's celebrate. You come back with me. Stay overnight.
To Mexico?
Well, it ain't far. It's only a couple hours. Come on. How's my princess?
I think there's someone in the truck.
Yeah, there's people back there, but I don't know who they are, and I don't ask.
Hey, American girl. Hay que llevar
You
unos
need to get
amigos
some
a
friends to
Llevas
Austin.
$500
You'll get
por cada
$500
uno.
for each of them.
Are you interested?
A clip from the trailer for The Girl. And now I want to play a clip of filmmaker David Riker talking about the events and circumstances that helped shape his film, The Girl.
And it really began in my research along the U.S.-Mexico border. I decided to set the film in the city of Nuevo Laredo, just across the river from Laredo, Texas, and was struck by how close those two worlds are, but also how far apart. I was drawn to the river because of its dramatic possibilities and also its poetic quality. One day I was invited to travel down the river by a fireman from Nuevo Laredo named Armando. I'd been told that the firemen actually trawl the river in search of bodies, but I was shocked to learn that Armando had pulled more than 600 bodies out of the river with his own hands. As we made our way down the river, Armando seemed to recall every body he'd pulled into his boat, sometimes 2 or 3 bodies in a single day. The body of a woman floating over here, a young man caught in the branches at the river's edge. At every twist and turn, another nameless person pulled into the boat. It was a gruesome catalog of memories. We turned a bend, and I started to see migrants at the river's edge, all along the Mexican side. They were crouched under trees, taking off their clothes, wading into the water, barebacked, crossing the river in inner tubes. Then I saw a bridge up ahead, and this long line of trucks waiting to cross into Texas. As we got closer, it looked like a giant conveyor belt, an endless stream of commerce moving freely into Texas. But down below, at the river, another story was unfolding. Then, out of the blue, we came upon a large plastic bag floating downstream. I looked around wondering where it came from. Someone had obviously slipped while crossing the river. He may have drowned, or he may have made it back to the river's edge and was standing behind a tree somewhere, stripped to his underwear, watching us. We pulled the bag into the boat, and I remember this eerie silence as Armando reached inside. And then he pulled out a pair of sneakers, and a man's clothes rolled into a ball. In one of the pockets, he found an ID card, and then a small book of prayers. And inside, there was a handwritten note from a mother to her son. I looked around again and felt this strange sense of violation. All of these things belonged to someone, but who? The mystery was like a spark, igniting other questions, and I wanted to know more. What does it mean to make such a journey? And what does it mean to be left behind? The migrants crossing, the trucks lined up across the bridge, the mother's note, all of these became seeds of the story, a kind of starting point for the film.
David Riker, director of The Girl, which is opening this weekend in New York, next weekend in L.A. To talk more about the film and the issues it raises, we are joined by David Riker in our New York studio, award-winning screenwriter and filmmaker. His previous films include La Ciudad and Sleep Dealer, along with Jeremy Scahill, who's co-writer of the new documentary Dirty Wars. And we're joined by the star, Abbie Cornish. She's an award-winning actress who's received critical acclaim for roles in Somersault, Candy, Bright Star. She's also renowned for performances in the films Sucker Punch and Limitless. We welcome you both to Democracy Now! Dave, very profound stories on the border, and yet you chose to make a feature film.
Yes, I mean, my interest in going to the border came out of work in New York City when I made the film The City, or La Ciudad. And I really am trying to find a language that allows us to talk about immigration, what it means to be an American, the politics of the border at the most human level, because the usual discussion is really just formed a kind of a void of silence. People are not talking about it. Americans know that the people who built their house, the people who are taking care of their children, who are cooking their food, are all new immigrants, but the conversation isn't happening. The fact, for example, that being a migrant today means leaving your children behind. It means a forced separation of family is not a political issue. That's just a human issue. And so I'm trying to write stories and make films that will open up that kind of discussion around the theme.
And your choice of Laredo and Nuevo Laredo, there are lots of twin cities along the border, but that particular area has a huge, long history, because obviously during the Mexican Revolution, there was lots of migration back and forth across the border, people fleeing to one side, fighting, spilling over into the other side. And unless you're from Texas, you don't really realize the central role that Laredo and Nuevo Laredo have played in the history of that region. Yeah, I traveled the whole length of the border, starting in San Diego, Tijuana, all the way to Brownsville, Matamoros, over a course of about 2 years. And I realized that I was attracted to the river as a border for its metaphoric qualities. And the two Laredos are incredible, partly because they're so close to each other. I mean, the experience of crossing that bridge is transformative. In 3 minutes, you're in a whole nother world. And the cities are fascinating. I mean, Nuevo Laredo exists because the people of Laredo, after the country was basically taken by the U.S., that territory, they packed up and crossed the river to stay in Mexico. So it's a very interesting area.
In this scene, in The Girl, set beside an abandoned train station outside Nuevo Laredo, Maritza Santiago, the young girl, challenges Abby's character, Ashley, to explain why she needs so much money.
When we find my mom, I'm going to ask her to give you the money.
What?
The $500. Isn't that why you're angry? Look, there were 8 of us, which is...
Well, I didn't get a penny, did I?
Why do you need so much money?
You know what a house costs in San Antonio? $70,000.
My mom says everyone in Texas is rich and has swimming pools, gardeners, and maids.
Oh, yeah? Well, I live in a trailer.
What's that?
It's a box.
That is a clip of The Girl. Abby Cornish, when we play this clip, we had to translate over it. You were speaking Spanish, but you're from Australia, and you didn't speak Spanish before this film.
And you also had to learn a Texas twang at the same time.
I know.
Which was harder.
Yeah, well, obviously the Spanish, I'd done a Texan accent before, but for me, that was the biggest hurdle and the biggest challenge on taking this role, and just to sort of amalgamate the two, you know, the Texan girl who can speak Spanish, but you want it to be one voice, you know, you want it to be one character coming from one place, and so it took a little bit of work just to sort of pull it all in, make it all one, to make Ashley, you know, one person. So I worked a lot with a dialect coach for the Texan accent, and also a Spanish teacher and a Spanish dialect coach. And then, of course, when you're in Mexico, that takes over as well.
What was the experience for you? Had you been in Mexico before?
I had not been in Mexico before. The first time that I went to Mexico was to meet David for a few days, and we did, I guess you would call it some form of rehearsal, but it was much more of a journey, I would say. It was about us, David and I, getting to know each other. It was about us getting to know Maritza. It was about us building relationships and starting to understand the roots of this story, what this story really is about, because as David just mentioned, it's quite intimate and it's quite personal, and I think that's what's important about this film, is we're putting faces and we're putting stories to something which we often look at as facts and figures, and we read in newspapers and we see on on news shows, and there's a certain detachment from the reality of it. It's so striking, like the time that we spent. You remember when we went and we hung out with all those immigrants that were traveling from South America, and it's just, these are all people like David has just mentioned that have left their children, their wives, and it's heartbreaking, and they have nothing. They've left everything behind to try and build a better life for their families, and they're human beings just the same as yourself or myself. It's just they've been dealt different cards in life,
Why did you decide to do this? I mean, you're a world-renowned star. You just wrapped, what, RoboCop?
Just finished RoboCop, yeah.
Why did you decide to do this independent film about this critical issue?
I mean, for me, I think the script was beautifully written and the story was so strong. I loved that it is a political film, but it's told on a very intimate scale. I was very much drawn to this character's evolution. From the dark, from a place of regret and sort of anger, and sort of someone who feels like life has kind of not treated them so well, that they're very angry at life, into the light, into motherhood, into herself, and connecting with herself, because I think that's an amazing journey and to go on. I think we all go on that journey in some way, and I love the journey into the light as well. I wanted to portray that story, give people a little bit of hope. And then also, I met David, and as soon as we met, I just knew it would be an incredible experience to make the film with him.